Bams. Today we are going to see how much this candy jar weighs. Actually, I already know the answer to this. It is 6.7 pounds. 6 7/10 pounds for some of you that don't know. But we're going to split it up with the top 10 people that got the top 10 highest grades in their last math tests. So if we are going to divide the candy up evenly, how much candy would each of the 10 kids get?
Okay, today we're going to be working on 7-2, estimating decimal quotients. You already know how to estimate quotients when dividing by whole numbers. Okay, today we're going to be working on 7-2, estimating decimal quotients. You already know how to estimate quotients when dividing by whole numbers. Today you will learn how to estimate quotients when dividing with decimals. So you already know what 2 divided by 2 is. We all know that equals 1. And we know that 2 divided by 1 equals 2. So I want you to think, what does 2 divided by 0.5 equal? So if we go back up to this problem real quick, 2 divided by 1 is 2. We know that the first number goes into the box, into the house. The second number goes on the outside. So by knowing that, the first number here needs to go on the outside, and the first number, the first number needs to go into the house, and the second number needs to go on the outside of the house. So now we have 5 divided by 2. So this is what you're going to be learning today, how to solve these problems. So I'm not going to give you the answer yet because we're going to practice a couple. I'll practice this one on the next page. So one way that I remember how to set up my problem is I just read it like I'm reading a book. So I'm going to write 2, and then I've already said that. Now I'm going to write the division symbol, which is this, and then I'm going to write my 0.5. That's how I know that it's on the outside of the house. So when you're solving problems that have a decimal on the outside of the house, you have to get rid of it. So we need to move it. We can't move it this way because if we moved it this way, we would still have it. So we need to move the decimal over 1. Because remember, if you have 5 with a decimal at the back, do you really need it? No, you don't. So that's how we get rid of it. Well, whatever we do on the outside, we must do on the inside. So on your 2, where does the decimal start if there is no decimal? It starts at the back like a period. So since we moved this decimal over 1 spot to get rid of it, we have to move the decimal inside over 1 spot. When we do that, what number do we put in the blank? 0. So our new problem now, after moving the decimals, looks like 5 divided by 20. And we can have the decimal on the back, but we don't need it because it doesn't matter. So now we just solve it like a regular division problem. How many times does 5 go into 20? 5 goes into 20 4 times because 4 times 5 is 20. Your answer is 4. So let's try a couple more of those. Once you get the hang of it, they're really easy, but they just look tricky when they're set up with a decimal point. Okay, so the first thing I want to know from you, this is 0.18 divided by 0.3. So I want you to find out or tell me which number goes into the house. Remember how I told you to think about it when you're setting it up. So answer the quiz question, which number goes in the house. Now, remember I said read it like a book. So we start with the 0.18 divided by 0.3. So that's how we set it up. Now we need to figure out these decimals. So the outside number can never, ever, 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 ever have a decimal. So we need to move it. So we have to move it over just 1 spot, make it like a period so we can get rid of it. But whatever we do on one side, we must do on the other side. So on the other side, am I going to move it 2 times to make it at the end? No, I'm not, because I only moved it over here 1 time. So that means I have to do the exact same thing and only move it once. So the new problem I'm working with is 3, because remember we got rid of the decimal, divided by 1.8. Okay, so now we have 3 divided by 1.8. So this kind of looks scary because there's still a decimal on the inside, and that's okay. Just don't think about it. How many times, just ask yourself, how many times does 3 go into 18? 6 times. So this, we have to remember that the 6 goes above the 8 because we're taking it into the whole number of 18, not just 1. So 6 times 3 is 18, and 18 minus 18, 0. But we can't just leave it as 6. We have to move this decimal straight up. So our answer is 0.6. Now, think about if you did the problem wrong by just the 6. If you said 3 goes into 18 6 times and you put the 6 over there, and then you did all your work, and you move the decimal straight up, it would give you 6, just a whole number. But our answer is 0.6, so it really matters where you put the first number in your quotient. Okay, so I would like you to write this one down in your spiral, and we're going to have 12 divided by 0.6. And in a quiz question, I want you to tell me which number goes into the house. Is it the 12 or is it the 0.6? And remember, you're reading it like a book from left to right. So which one goes into the house? Yes, the first one, 12. And then the divided by sign, and then your 0.6 is on the outside. So now, what would your first step be? You cannot start the problem yet. What would your first step be? Yes, we have to move the decimal to get rid of it on the outside of the house. Cannot be out there. So we need to move it to make it a whole number. Now that we've moved it, what would our second step be? Our second step would be on the inside of the house to move your decimal over, but there is no decimal. So if there is no decimal, where do you put it? At the end, like a period, like at the end of a sentence. So now I have 12, but I have to move it over once. So let me move my decimal over once. What do I fill in the blank? Fill in a 0. So this is what my new problem will look like. I moved the decimal over with the 6, so now I just have whole number 6. And I moved the decimal over and made a 0 with the 12, so now I have 120. So now all you need to do is solve 6 divided into 120. Well, we know 6 goes into 12 2 times. 2 times 6 is 12. Drop down your 0, or you could just pop it back up since you have double zeros, and your answer is 20. So I want you to look at this real quick. When you're dividing a whole number by a number that's smaller than 1, so in this case our whole number is 12, your number that's smaller than 1 is 0.6, your answer will always, always, always be bigger than what you started with in your whole number. So I want you to mark this as number 1 in your journal or your spiral, and I'm going to have you try this on your own. So we have 102 divided by 9.6. So you go ahead and solve that out, and let's see if we get the same answer. We'll set it up together, and then you can solve it. So remember, we're reading it like a book. So we're reading it like, I'm going to erase this for now. We're reading it like 102 divided by 9.6. So I want you to go ahead and try to solve that as best as you can. Put your answer into the quiz question, and then I'll show you how to work it out. So the first thing that I needed to do is move this decimal over one place because I cannot have a decimal on the outside of the house. So that means I have to move a decimal somewhere in here, but there is no decimal, so where do I put the decimal? Yes, I need to put it like a period at the end of a sentence. So period at the end of 102, but I still have to move it over 1 because I did it on the other side. Everything has to be equal, and then fill that in with a 0. So my new problem that I am now working with is 96 divided by 1020. So then you should have said, how many times does 96 go into 102? And you would have said once. And 102 minus 96 is 6. Drop down your 0. And now you have to ask yourself, how many times does 96 go into 60? Well, it does not. So you would say 0 times. 0 times 96 is 0. So we would have a remainder of 60. And you won't be seeing that much because in questions like these, it's going to ask you to round. So in this case, what would you round this to? We would just round it to your whole number. So this answer would be 10. So on the next one that I want you to try, I want you to estimate. So when it asks you on your practice work to estimate, you are going to estimate the numbers given to you before you get the answer. So what is 48 closest to in the nearest tenths? Is it closest to 40 or 50? Well, 50, so let's change it to 50. Drop this down to make it your division problem still. And 4 is 4 closer to 5. We want it closer to the a whole number that will easily go into 50. So does 4 easily go into 50? Not really. So we want to make it 5 because 5 can go into 50 super easy. So now you would say, what's 50 divided by 5? And you would get 10 as your answer. So now that I've shown you one, I want you to try one on your own. So you're still estimating each quotient, but remember what I told you, when it says that on these, you need to estimate or use compatible numbers to help you estimate or use these as compatible numbers first before you get your answer. So let's go ahead and figure out what these would be. So 72.59, there's a number that's close to it that can go into a number that's close to 7. So I'm just going to tell you how I would do it. I would leave this as 72 first to see if we can try that out. And then I would say, well, is there a number around 7 that can go into 72 equally very easily? And there is. It would be 8. So 72 divided by 8 would give you 9. Another way that you could have done this, or you could do this, is say 72.59. So another way you can do it is by rounding this up to 73, but then you get stuck in a problem and you have nothing that goes evenly into 73 that's close to 7. So that's when you know you should just make it a 72. So I want you to try one on your own. This one will be on your own. So the only thing I'm going to help you get started with is that I want you to round this to the nearest tenths, and I want you to round this to the nearest ones. So go ahead and do that, and this should be a division symbol. So go ahead and do that and solve and give me your estimated answer. And your estimated answer will already be estimated because you're estimating these two first. So go ahead and change those, estimate, and then tell me what your answer is in a quiz question, please. So what you should have done is taken 9.6 and made it a 10, and then your 0.91, the only thing that it's really close to, is 1. Well, 10 divided by 1 is 10. So that one was an easier one. Let's do one more. I lied, we're going to do 2 more, but you do not need to estimate on these. So I want you to try this one without estimating.